they're not necessarily so nice. I mean, there's predators and there's prey and there's competitors and there's parasites and all kinds of awful things happen. So what do we really want a society based on that? But the idea of an ecological civilization would be to change the fundamental basis of the civilization from that wealth affirming to one that is life affirming.
So this is a man that is precious to me in my life, who is a leading thinker that synthesizes loads of beautiful elements to help us understand ourselves, as well as where we're going collectively, the state of our world, and crucially, the path to peace. For my journey, I've been exploring meditation and Tai Chi and ideas that can help us as individuals live in peace. But it's not very useful finding our inner chill if our family members are miserable, if our countries are facing climate breakdown and war. And so true peace is not only peace with ourselves, but peace in our relationships, peace in our countries, and peace on the planet. And I think that something that is really crucial in our journey towards peace is having somewhere to go, like an actual vision of something to work towards, instead of just avoiding catastrophe. It's like, okay, what is the world that we want to build? And so, Jeremy Lent, it's such a pleasure to be with you, and I'm really excited to get deeper into your upcoming book, Ecological Civilisation, and your work of beginning to really flesh out what that future world could look like.
Hey friend, before we get into the rest of the episode, if you want to help support me make more videos like these to help you and to help us collectively live in balance, I invite you to join the online Wudang Taoist Wellness Academy. This is Master Gu's, my Tai Chi master's, teachings put onto the internet, recorded with love from the heart of China. You can learn Tai Chi forms, Qigong forms, guided meditations, Taoist philosophy, anytime, anywhere, amazing practices to empower you to take charge of your wellness. We offer a free 7-day trial so you can see what learning's available for you for no risk and join the community. There's 800 students learning from around the world with monthly live streams with Master Gu. There's so much for you to explore. Click the link in the description to join and see for yourself. I hope you enjoy the rest of today's episode.
Yeah, thanks. So great to be in conversation with you again, George. Love it. Thank you.
So could you explain this term, ecological civilization? What is that for people who haven't come across that term before?
Yeah, well, it's a term that I came across a few years back that's really been kind of fleshed out by a number of different people. And as soon as I came across this phrase, just a light bulb went off in my own mind. Because the notion about an ecological civilization is kind of twofold, if you will. One is that it gives this sense that it's possible to actually have a totally different kind of civilization than the one we have right now. So that's the word civilization. It's a big topic. It's not talking about ecological economics or ecological this or that, but it's everything about our civilization could be basically on a different basis. And so to get that understanding, it's kind of helpful in a way to understand what is the basis of our current civilization. Because our current civilization is really built on a foundation that actually has to do with extraction and exploitation. We look at the world around us, and our civilization basically says everything that's not human is a resource to extract from for our best benefits. And then even within the human society, our whole civilization is based on people exploiting others in order to make a buck, in order to sort of make that happen. So the entire civilization has got this kind of foundation of wealth accumulation. That's what gives status, power. That's what it's based on. But the idea of an ecological civilization would be to change the fundamental basis of the civilization from that wealth affirming to one that is life affirming, which is where the ecological part comes in. Because what the ecological part says is it's this notion of, it's sort of asking this big question of what would a civilization actually look like if it were based on the principles that allow ecosystems, like ecologies, ecosystems, to flourish and regenerate and be resilient, sometimes over millions of years, because they all share certain principles, different kind of ecosystems, whether a small lake ecosystem to an entire jungle to a savanna, whatever they are, there are certain principles that nature has evolved over billions of years that make them work. And the question is, could we take those same principles and apply them to human society? And what might that look like if we actually set designed our society to set the conditions for all parts of our society to flourish?
Powerful ideas. And yeah, we come from nature, and it has survived over millions and billions of years with fluctuations and some big events that brought the systems out of balance, but overall a remarkable resilience that, yeah, for our civilization, which, you know, maybe 4,000, 6,000 years in the making, has achieved a lot, but we're on this suicidal course at the moment where we just haven't set up these basic principles for flourishing in a way that can last a long time. And what are some of these qualities? Like what do natural systems show? What are the characteristics?
That's a great place to kind of begin exploring that. And well, maybe the most important thing to look at, and someone watching this might immediately come to their mind is like, well, wait a minute, if you look at the way ecosystems work, like in nature, they're not necessarily so nice. I mean, there's predators and there's prey and there's competitors and there's parasites and all kinds of awful things happen. So what, do we really want a society based on that? And so that's a great question to ask. And when we look at ecosystems in general, we can really see them as driven by a combination of competition, like those things I just said, and cooperation, because the ecosystems also work very symbiotically together. So in any ecosystem, you have this kind of, you almost might think of it as a harmonious blend of those two different forces of competition and cooperation. But here's what's so crucial, and this is this great insight from evolutionary biology. If you look at the whole unfolding of life over billions of years on Earth, there have really only been like 5 or 6 major jumps in complexity of life, like when we went from like simple cells to complex nucleus-based cells, or multicellular organisms, or communities of organisms. And there's a few major changes. And every one of those shifts in the complexity of life came around not through more competition from one organism going, okay, I'm going to find a better way of doing this, but actually different species learning how, if they worked together synergistically, they could develop what's called in biology mutually beneficial symbiosis, where so you have two organisms learning that I'm expert at this. Maybe it's like a plant might go, I'm expert at photosynthesis. And an insect might say, well, I can take what you can rake from photosynthesis, and then I'll help you to pollinate your the plants elsewhere, because I'm an expert in flying around. So they take two different expertise and they work together, where the whole enables something greater than those separate parts if they were trying to do their own thing by themselves. That's what is, I mean, we can just call that symbiosis for short, but it's specifically mutually beneficial symbiosis. And that is how, if you walk in an ecosystem now, walk in the forest, you see this symbiosis going all the way around you, not just the plants photosynthesizing and the animals transporting their seeds, but also you get like the fungal networks, like actually making chemical reactions, making things available to the plants that wouldn't otherwise be there. And the plants even use those mycorrhizal fungal networks to communicate with other plants elsewhere in the ecosystem, etc. So fundamental to an ecological civilization is this premise that rather than people exploiting each other or humans exploiting the rest of non-human nature, to develop ways to find where we can be in mutually beneficial symbiosis with each other. So that's kind of key. There's other, and if you want, I can take you through some of these other sort of core principles.
What would an example be of where we're not in mutually symbiosis now, and an ecological civilization, how would that do it differently?
Yeah. Well, one really important way would be to essentially look at how kind of business enterprises are structured. So now, a typical way in which, if somebody wants to start a company, or if you join a company, the classic structure is you have owners and you have employees, and it's considered natural that the people with the capital are then really out to exploit who the employees as much as they can, and there's this sort of battle that sometimes is more polite and sometimes it's downright nasty. In the power battle, do the employees try to get more money or more power, or to what extent do the owners of capital able to exploit them? And that's fundamental to our civilization the way we have it right now. But there are other ways to organize, and one is like a worker-owned cooperatives, where basically the ownership is actually spread among the people who are doing the work, and so decision making and any extra profits are actually distributed within the entire cooperative. And another way is actually going even beyond that. There's like commons-based ways of organizing, where, and this is actually more like how humans organize themselves over many thousands of years before our modern systems developed, where there's basically parameters are generally set in self-organized manners across a group. And there's a sort of self-enforcement policy that doesn't need to have some outside group coming in and saying, this is how you're meant to do things. It actually regulates itself. So those are kind of ways in which, when you start to look at how we can organize our society from this point of mutuality, you'll lead naturally to those kind of systems instead.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful to be able to imagine a world that's different. And, we were talking about organizations and like how to set them up. And there is the kind of assumed setup of, hierarchy, bosses, and then is an extractive element to that of like somebody puts in X number of hours of their time, and then that creates X benefit for the owners, but then how much does that get for, how much of that is given to the workers? And any thoughts on how we can break out of this kind of confinement of imagination? Because these are such fundamental principles that we can see from nature, but there seems to be kind of a disconnect of what seems effective. It's like, well, the way we set ourselves up is inevitable because this is how to create efficient and good organizations. So, all of this nature stuff is all well and useful, but it's not functionable. So.
Yeah. Well, and certainly if anyone watching this is looking at developing they've got an idea and they want to build it in their own way. It is, I think, a fundamental place to begin is looking at how you set up your enterprise, whatever it is, from the outset. And I think just with a little bit of imagination and exploration as to what's already out there, there's tons of great legal structures that enable that kind of cooperative-based or commons-based structure to be there right from the outset. And it takes a shift because we're trained in our society right now to go, well, it's my idea, so I want to get the benefits, and so if it's successful, I should get most of the profits or whatever around that. So it takes a shift to go, actually, it's possible to gain different kind of benefits that are not necessarily monetary from putting your ideas into action and making them happen. Once you begin to really kind of expand your identity to be something larger than just your own individual place with status in our society. So that's what I would encourage for people looking from their own, where they're coming from, as to where to go. But if you look more in terms of just the bigger picture of like, where is our society headed? Then a reasonable issue that comes up with this idea of an ecological civilization is that, well, it's sort of to your point, like, well, it's not realistic. Look at what our society is doing right now. Where can we go? And I think that how we can look at this kind of approach that I'm taking of looking at what's actually possible has to do with a methodology that's known as backcasting. What this methodology has to do is it's a kind of a straightforward concept, if you will. It says, rather than start where we are now and say, what would be better? Like, what sort of directions we'd like to go in and what would be a better way to do it. So right now, fossil fuels are destroying the earth. Well, let's reduce fossil fuels and let's invest in renewables. And that's the normal way of doing it. But what backcasting does is it starts from another place. It says, what's an outcome that would be really desirable, that we actually want to have happen, and set that in place in our minds before we even start getting focused on, well, what's realistic, what's actually practical from where we stand right now. But once you've really fleshed out that outcome, you've got a sense of where you actually want to go to, then the backcasting goes, okay, now what would be the steps that lead us from where we are now to that place? Not saying that that place is where we'll get to next year or maybe even 10 years from now, but are we moving in the direction towards that place? And sometimes that direction might be very different than the direction that you might take if you just start incrementally and saying, well, let's just get a bit better at doing what we're doing now, rather than where do we really want to go. So that's what this ecological civilization vision is about. It's not a utopia. It's not saying, well, wouldn't it be great if we all just loved each other and wow, how nice, let's just get lost in this dream. It's an actual vision that is based on what is really being done right now, that's shown to be successful on the ground, that actually is based on real human nature, not how we'd like humans to be or anything like that. But it's about setting the conditions for things to work, and then looking at how we could actually move our society right now. And there's practical policy options that are available to us right now that could move us very clearly in that direction, as opposed to a direction towards the destruction, which is the path we're on right now.
I think that's such an important point, and something that I love about your work is the relationship between understanding ourselves as individuals and then how that then manifests on the collective systemic level, and also how our personal transformation can lead to systemic transformation while also needing to focus on the systemic. So for like our own personal healing, for me on my journey I started off trying to not be anxious. So, that led me to my whole like finding myself and, all the kind of the cliches of coming to understand my relationship to the world and nature. But my starting point was not being anxious. That was the focus of my energy. And actually that's only part of me. And I've learned that actually the key to my healing and what I feel is healing as individuals is, what does a balanced, harmonious George, Jeremy look like? And then working towards that. And then that then reflects on the collective level is that we could focus on incremental changes on this, trying to recycle your plastic bottles or move to an electric car, but without actually really seeing what could the world be like that really nourishes us, and then working backwards. I think that is a really crucial point. Any other characteristics then of going back to nature? So we've got this mutual beneficial symbiosis.
So if that was a key one, really another really important one is very related to everything you were just talking about right now. And it's this notion of when we look at how ecosystems actually are structured, what we find is that nature uses a fractal design. I'm sure pretty much everyone watching this probably knows what fractals are, but just to make it clear, basically fractals are like designs where there's a pattern that repeats itself, or roughly repeats itself, not exactly, but closely repeats itself, but at different scales. And you see fractal designs everywhere in nature, like the sort of patterning on leaves of plants or on ferns, or you see it in the patterns of clouds or coastlines, or actually even in neural networks, or just the bronchioles of our lungs. Everywhere, basically, these fractal designs. There's actually physics reasons why those are the best designs for energy optimization in nature. But as a part of fractal designs, what we get is the sense that different systems are organized according to the similar set of principles as the largest systems in which they're part. So every system is embedded within a larger system. And so a single cell in my body is part of a community of cells, which is part of an organ, which is then part of my body. And then I am part of a family and a community, and that community is part of a larger society. We're all part of humanity as a species, and as a species, we're part of the living earth. So there's this whole, what's known as a holarchy of different systems embedded within systems. And in an ecosystem, when it's really flourishing, it only flourishes when each of those levels of that holarchy are also flourishing. Because it's the way we have our civilization right now, it's kind of designed on that zero-sum game, where there's this belief that if I'm really wealthy, I can be wealthy at the expense of other people, or the expense of the rest of life, and that's okay because I do well. But at a deeper layer, we recognize that full flourishing only happens when all the different layers beyond you and within you are also looking really healthy and enjoying well-being. And so this is what I call fractal flourishing. So it's a principle in ecosystems, and then it's a principle in an ecological civilization too. And how that translates into an ecological civilization is when we look at each person, is recognizing the focusing on the dignity and well-being and health and peace of every individual person within that society, actually enables the society as a whole to be the fullest, healthiest place it could be. So you don't have one small group doing well at the expense of other groups, but you're looking for those kinds of policies and approaches which allow each of those layers to flourish together at fractal layers.
And yeah, as I've understood more about who I am, that I'm not just this individual separated from the world by this bag of skin, this individual man as an island, that I'm interconnected, part of a greater system. I myself am this self-organizing system. And then, to realize that if I can be of service to the world or family, community, like whatever resonates with me. So, we all have different ways of being of service that will resonate with you differently from me and for yourself. And to, not just focus my life and my energy on things that I want, me. Because we are embedded in these systems and we really are this greater system, it feels good for me to be of service. And when I understand that I am connected, then I realize that, I'm actually helping life flourish because I am life. And for me, that gives me a deep meaning and kind of a practical spirituality to be motivated to be part of a movement for balance and peace, because, I'm part of this great unfolding miracle of life on planet Earth.
Yeah. And so that, I think, is key in the sense that it's a shift in consciousness. It's a shift in ontology, or our sense of existence, that is very connected with that move towards an ecological civilization, which also, again, would lead to a logical kind of question in terms of if we're heading into this terrible crisis, meta-crisis, as a civilization right now, how do we even get to that shift in consciousness? I mean, it's isn't that going to take too long? We need to do stuff from right now with people in the maybe more limited places of consciousness to actually to make that shift happen. And it's a really big question. And one of the things that gives me a real sense of hope, even in the face of the desolation that we're seeing happening right now, is that the shift in consciousness we're talking about is not trying to get people to sort of evolve to some greater layer of consciousness than they already have. It's really more a matter of helping people to reconnect with their naturally evolved consciousness that they're born into as human beings. It is essentially our human birthright. Because as humans, from the moment we're born, we actually are naturally evolved to want to be part of community, to care about those around us, to want a place of love and nurturing, to want to connect with non-human relatives in the world around us and to be part of it. That's what we actually naturally want. That's how we as humans evolved as nomadic hunter-gatherers over 95+% of our history. But what our current civilization then has to do is through basically through education, but through media and through all kinds of conditioning systems, right from the earliest years, it has to like drum our natural instincts out of us. It has to basically tell us, no, leave those behind. Like basically destroy some of those naturally loving feelings we might have, and train us. No, we need to like look for status, and we need to fit ourselves into this kind of corporate capitalist sort of machine and become cogs in it. And we have to learn to exploit, and it has to drive out what is natural to us and sort of recondition us to fit the civilization. And that's where the hope comes, that actually what we need to do is like recognize that within ourselves and with others around us, and shed those layers of conditioning and just get back to what we naturally want as human beings. So the wonderful thing is that every time someone's born into this world, it's another person who's born with that potential of working towards really the civilization, an ecological civilization that actually we as humans evolved to want to flourish in, to be able to flourish in.
So beautiful and empowering. Like often the spiritual journey or journey of self-realization, if the word spiritual doesn't resonate, often we have metaphors of climbing towards something. So like transcending the human, transcending this world, going to paradise. When I feel that the journey is more of an embracing of where we are and like meeting ourselves where we are, and that we already have these deep desires to be of service for community, for joy, for play, and an obvious feeling that sustainability or the conservation of things that are scarce and are precious is a good thing. And so this idea of the 7 generations from the indigenous American communities, where they make their decision making on 7 generations before and give thanks to the 7 generations before and think about the impact for 7 generations in the future. An acknowledgement that our connection isn't just with what is, but also across time as well. Like we're only able to be talking to you because of our ancestors who made the internet and those who continue to function it. And my children, if and when I have children, will be the actions that I take now will, in subtle ways but real ways, affect their lives.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that's beautiful. So there's sort of these different dimensions to that sense of our identity expanding beyond that individual self, like you say, past and future, and then all around us, and expanding, beyond humanity to all of life on Earth. And so that's a key element of this vision of what's possible. And imagine what that might mean in terms of how we relate to the natural world. If we actually look for those synergistic ways of working with nature, which are possible. Possible in areas such as even like in agriculture. We don't need this kind of fossil fuel-based, synthetic, fertilized monocrop agriculture. Agroecology has been shown to work every bit as well in terms of productivity, but without all of these fertilizers that cause massive dead zones in the oceans and all just terrible impact on the abundance of life in general. And agroecology is basically just a process of kind of integrating human activity and human culture with the land, and really working in conjunction with the land to sort of integrate the different forms of cultivation so that it actually helps the land itself to remain fertile, remain regenerative, like you say, into the long-term future, where we're not basically colonizing the future, if you will, at our own, for our own benefit, but actually essentially investing in those future generations.
Yeah, and that idea of regenerative. So rather than just, we had this conversation last night about the word sustainable, of like, okay, so, if we extract so much from the earth, but then eventually get sustainable, so we're eking out this like just qualitatively less abundant world, is sustainable really the aim? And so actually regenerative, if we can not only sustain what we've got, but for my kids and future generations to create a more abundant world that can support them more easily.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And nature, of course, needs that regeneration, because right now we've destroyed the vast bulk of the abundance of nature that we as humans evolved into. I mean, really, in any ecosystem in the world right now, or most of them, we find that the actual abundance of nature, whether it's species, the number of species, the population size, whatever, is about maybe, we've lost about 90% of that richness that nature evolved into before our civilization started to undo it. So there's a lot of regeneration that's needed to get us back to what's possible.
For someone listening or watching this, if they feel inspired by, I love, so Jeremy's book, when will it be out?
Well, probably not for a couple of years yet, because I'm just starting writing it now. But there's a lot of different talks I've given about this vision of an ecological civilization, and essays and book chapters about it.
Yeah, because I think it's a really beautiful concept of, given nature can be resilient over so many millions of years, what are these principles that we can emulate? And if someone watching and listening this feels inspired to be part of the movement to create an ecological civilization, how would you say they can take action to be part of the movement?
Well, thanks for that question. Well, the thing I'd invite anybody to do is to actually explore possibly joining an online community that we've evolved in the last couple of years. It's called the Deep Transformation Network. And it's available, you can find it basically at www.deeptransformation.network. So
I'll share links somewhere as well.
And the kind of tagline to this community is exploring pathways toward an ecological civilization. And it's a community of thousands of people from around the world who recognize the need for a deep transformation. And oftentimes people who actually start to research into what's actually going on in the world more deeply, you can find yourself feeling quite lonely, quite alone in your community. And you start talking to others around you about what's actually happening, and they look at you like, well, don't rain on my parade, or like, well, we don't want to hear this, or are you out to lunch, or whatever. And you feel like, okay, maybe, am I missing something? And then by joining this community, you get to see, yes, there's thousands of people that I can be connected with that share this recognition of what we need to do. And we have like live conversations, live events, and all kinds of rich conversations and feeds where we share articles with each other. And there's a lot of depth of thought around it, but in a container where you can feel held and where you're not basically worried about getting like trolls attacking you if you say the wrong thing or whatever. So it's a great community that we're building and really developing a sort of self-organized collective intelligence, because none of us has all of the answers to all of these issues we're looking at. But together, we do tend to find that much wiser, more kind of deeper and more thoughtful ways of making sense of things arise.
Beautiful. And yeah, I'm a member of the Deep Transformation Network, and I'll put links in the description, and it's a really beautiful example of how we can use the power of the internet to connect us. And I do believe that, people who understand their relationship to the world and want to be part of the movement to create a more regenerative and flourishing future can connect with one another. And for all the challenges of the internet, with its ability to divide us, to put us into our echo chambers, I do also believe that it is a way to distribute power and distribute information, and ultimately will be one of the key tools to help create a world that I do believe is possible.
Yes.
And so, really celebrating all the work that you're doing to, create that space for people to connect.
Yeah, thanks. And it's, the thing is, it's so easy to look at, once you really start to look at what's going on in the world around us today, it's very easy to actually fall into a sense of despair. And quite honestly, I feel not to at least touch into that feeling, you're kind of numbing yourself to what is going on. Because the reality is, whether it's climate breakdown, ecological devastation, the unbelievable inequalities that get worse and worse year by year, there's a lot of reason to sense that we're headed into really difficult times. But what keeps me going, actually keeps me energized and excited, is just this recognition that there's nothing predetermined about the future. There's nothing sort of inevitable. That no matter, even if it seems like I'm using my brain, I'm looking at these paths, of course we're heading for collapse or whatever. There's no way we can ever predict where we're actually going. But what we do know is that there are possible ways of organizing ourselves and our relationship with the rest of life on Earth that could lead to this future flourishing. And that's what I get excited about, is once we see that there are possible futures, then the best thing we can do with our lives and with the lives of those around us is to put our energy into building those possible futures together. Because it's really, as this civilization begins to unravel, which it is doing, and it's going to do worse and more extremely in the years to come. But it's in that unraveling that the kind of tightness of how it's organized begins to loosen up. And in that loosening, or basically in the gaps that get opened up, that's where it's possible to kind of build what this systems theorist Ilya Prigogine once called, to build islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. And that's what I feel is so exciting about what's actually possible. Building those islands and connecting them together so we can have the potential of creating that better future.
So beautiful. And for me on my journey, feeling that grief and despair, like I do have moments of feeling it. And I do think it is important to feel it, because there is a great loss happening, and often we can numb ourselves out and distract ourselves. And so I think that feeling it is important on the journey, but then not to stay there. And, it's actually how constructive is it to stay there? And, from a kind of spiritual perspective of enlightenment is not the freedom from pain, but the freedom to experience pain with a balanced mind. So, there has been challenges throughout being human, and can we acknowledge what's going on and act and respond accordingly, but also to bring a sense of lightness. Also because I believe that lightness and that joy is part of a key energy for the movement. That if we're all just stuck in despair, like who wants to join that crew? It's just like, we're the team Titanic sinking. Whereas actually, if we have a vision of what a beautiful world could be like, which, as we've discussed, we already have this nature within us, it's just setting up the systems to help support that nature come out, then, I think that is an energy that then motivates, it invites, as opposed to scolds.
Right, exactly.
And another metaphor I love is that, all of this pressure that we're feeling, it's kind of like in a a Western movie where you've got the goodie on the horse getting chased by the baddies, and we'll ignore the kind of genocidal stereotypes of the Indians and in the desert chasing the cowboy. But that aside, we've got the cowboy riding on his horse. He's in the desert and he's going into this big canyon, and the world's closing in on him, and he's thinking, this is going to be a dead end. I'm going to be a goner. But he keeps riding, the enemy coming closer and closer, and then there's like a gap at the end of this canyon, like this big, and it's just wide enough for his horse to get through.
Yeah.
And then some boulders fall down, stopping the baddies coming, and the hero gets away. And so actually, if he had given up hope as the world closed in and the pressure was growing, then he would have rejected the very thing that saved him, because it was the pressure that then led to the transformation.
I love that. Yeah, and that sort of brings to mind to me to shift metaphors and gives a similar kind of conception of that. It's this notion of sort of the brightness in the gloom or whatever, and it's this recognition that say like we're looking at all these potential possibilities of how the world might unfold in the next century, and maybe a large number of those possibilities leads to catastrophe. Either collapse or what people call fortress Earth, where the elites kind of fortress themselves off and essentially collapse for most people, while they are sort of getting themselves neurally and genetically enhanced and doing all kinds of stuff, almost separating themselves from the rest of humanity. There's a lot of bleak potentials out there. But imagine if you were in a dark, like a room with no light, and there's like this single screen, and on the screen, all the different pixels are also blacked out, except for just one or two little pixels which have that which are brightly shining. So in this darkness, where your attention is going to be attracted to in the entire place is just those one or two pixels, which are bright. And also the darker it is, the more bright those pixels will be available to be seen. And that's the way in which, as things get worse in our society right now, we need to recognize that focusing on those tiny possibilities, no matter how small they are, doesn't even matter. But the ones that we're looking at that actually lead to that positive future, they get brighter and brighter the darker the rest of our, everything around us seems to become. So I think that's another way of realizing how important it is to remain tenacious in that focus on what's possible.
Beautiful. And an inspiring message to close this conversation on. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for your inspiring and deep work. And I'll put links to books and the Deep Transformation Network in the description. And more power to you on your journey.
Well, thank you, George. It's always such a pleasure to connect up together. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to support me, make more episodes like this, as well as learning loads for yourself, check out the online Wudang Taoist Wellness Academy, Master Gu's teaching platform. You can learn Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, Taoist philosophy, so much amazing content from the ancient Chinese and Taoist traditions to help you take charge of your wellness. There's a free 7-day trial so you can try with no risk to see what learning is available and join perhaps Master Gu for some of his live streams and the community. There's so much for you to explore. Click the link in the description. Hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you for the next video.